59 years ago, the Sikh pre-baccalaureate program was established as a result of efforts by social activists and progressive politicians to provide access to college for students, primarily students low-income, working class, Black and Puerto Rican students at the time, whose academic needs and access to a college degree remain unmet by CUNY. We speak their names in reverence: Shirley Chisholm, Percy E. Sutton, Charles Rangel, among them, and we stand proudly on their shoulders. These Sikh founders followed what today is called DEI principles before this even became fashionable, and were woke long before the term became popular. Today on this forum, we have political activists who are as much needed today as they were then, as they gather to have a much needed conversation with our generation of students. As a legislative program, we understand that our two primary stakeholders are the students who invest their dreams, hopes, and aspirations, and the state of New York, who annually secures funding for the SEED program. This funding is to make sure that our students get support with tuition, support with transportation, and books. And all of you saw that increase in transportation money. Aren't you happy for that? No? You're not happy? You want to give it back? Thank you. And if you didn't get it yet, please reach out to our FA liaison and speak to me about it so that we can make sure that you get your money. And also making sure that there's an infrastructure that creates an ecosystem of support with dedicated staff and faculty for the duration of your time here in college. As representatives of the state, Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, Assembly Member Nily Rozic, Assembly Member Khaleel Anderson, who's an alum of the program and a tireless advocate for the program. We're going to ask them to stand at this time if they're here. We're going to ask them to stand. And I want us to give them their flowers now. Every Sikh student, staff, faculty in the building, just stand and let's give these people a rousing round of applause. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. And it is because of you that our program continues to exist and that our students go on, move on to invest back in the state, in the city, and in the nation. We thank you wholeheartedly. It is now my honor to invite President Frank H. Wu, the president of Queens College that hosts the SEED program of the City University of New York. Let's give President Wu.
Thank you so much, Director Blackman Richards. Another big round of applause for Norca Blackman Richards, who makes She's the one who makes it all happen. I want to extend the warmest welcome to all of our guests, starting with Lieutenant Governor Antonio Delgado, the recipient of the President's Medal of Commencement here in 2023, and a special friend of Queens College. Assembly Member Khaleel Anderson, who, as you heard, is an alum of Queens College and of SEEK. He's wearing the SEEK pin today. Assembly Member Nily Rozic, who we consider an honorary alum because she is a graduate of the Townsend Harris High School. And the moderator of today's program, Zaire Couloute, back from Boston and now helping to teach in the SEEK program. One of our distinguished alumni who served 2 terms as the Student Association president. I'd also like to thank everyone who helped to put this together, from those who I've already named, the high-ranking officials, to distinguished lecturer Jimmy Vaca, the one and only. Jimmy, wave to all your fans. Ashley Meza, the Downstate Outreach Director for the Lieutenant Governor, and all of the Chisholm Leadership Fellows. Thank you. I also want to acknowledge the SEEK program and all of its staff. SEEK is at the heart of what we do. It represents the best of Queens College, the best of the City University of New York. Queens College, founded in 1937, has as its purpose lifting people up. Not just you as individuals, but your communities, your kith and kin, and SEEK is one of the best means by which we do that. I'm so proud of the history of SEEK on this campus. Do take a look in the library's rotunda for the magnificent display that details it, and so many of the graduates, in addition to Zaire Couloute and Assemblymember Anderson, also United States Representative Adriano Espiat, the first Dreamer ever elected to the United States House of Representatives. Perhaps some of you in this room will follow in those footsteps and be elected to state or federal office. And to ensure that that happens, at Queens College, we know that the most important right and responsibility that we have as United States citizens is voting, casting that ballot in which we are all equal, and every vote counts and will be counted in just a few weeks. The clock tower on this campus, gracing our Rosenthal Library, this building, honors Goodman, Cheney, and Schwerner, who 60 years ago gave their lives to help register African-American voters in the South, and for their efforts were murdered by the Ku Klux Klan. That violence is a reminder of how sacred this right and responsibility is, how it is hard fought, and how it must be exercised by each and every one of us, whoever we are. Recent presidential elections have also demonstrated that every single ballot matters. New York City has set up special early voting sites, and we're one of them, to make it easier for busy people to vote. So I hope you will all come out, because you know that citizenship involves some obligations, some duties, and our diverse democracy depends on each and every one of us standing up and speaking out. That's why our college motto is "We learn so that we may serve." So I'll close finally with a pitch for voter registration. It's not too late. If you are a United States citizen who has lived at your current New York State address for 30 days prior to the election, so it's not too late, and you'll be 18 or older on November 5th. 18 or older on November 5th, you can still register, and you should do so. You can do that online, in person, or by mail, and you can even register if you have a driver's license through the Department of Motor Vehicles. Remember, the deadline is October 26th, so you still have a little bit of time. It is up to all of us to encourage voter turnout. That will be so important, and we have stepped up here by offering that voting site. And tell all of your friends and family, their vote counts. Now, allow me to give the microphone and the stage back to Director Blackman Richards, and thank you once again for all you do to guide SEEK. Take care.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Okay. Hi, my name is Tasha Jeffers. I'm a Queens College student majoring in political science and a minor in business and liberal arts. I'm an American Needs Youth Fellow, a Shirley Chisholm Fellow, and also a Sikh Generation Leader. It is my honor to introduce Lieutenant Governor Delgado. Lieutenant Governor Delgado was born and raised in Sankaty, New York, and currently resides in Rhinebeck, New York, with his wife and twin boys. A graduate of College University, Mr. Delgado earned a Rhodes Scholarship, and after returning home from Oxford, received a law degree from Harvard Law School. Mr. Delgado spent the next 5 years pursuing a career as a hip-hop artist in LA, empowering young people through music. Following that, he worked in the corporate space as an attorney, focusing on complex commercial litigation. These diverse experiences inspired Mr. Delgado to step into public service and work to empower all communities. Elected to the U.S. House of Representatives in 2018, he represented New York 19th Congressional District, becoming the first person of color to represent upstate New York in Congress. While in Congress, Lieutenant Governor Delgado was frequently recognized as one of the most effective and bipartisan representatives, working with colleagues from both parties at all levels of government. In getting 18 of his bills signed into law, 10 under President Trump and 8 under President Biden. Mr. Delgado was appointed in May of 2022 to serve as Lieutenant Governor and was elected to a full term in New York in November of 2022. As Lieutenant Governor, he serves as chair of the Hate and Bias Prevention Unit, oversees the Regional Economic Development Council, and was recently tasked with heading up the newly formed Office of Service and Civic Engagement. Without further ado, please help me in welcoming the Lieutenant Governor of New York State.
Good afternoon. How we doing? We good? Tasha, thank you very much for the introduction and for your leadership and commitment to service and civic engagement. I want to also acknowledge Norca Blackman Richards for your leadership. Can you hear me now? Yeah, let me do this. You know, I used to be a hip hop artist, so we can figure this out. Is this better? Oh, she plugged her ears. It's too loud. I want to get it right. Are we good? Mic check. Are we good? Yes. Okay. To my friend, Assemblyman Khaleel Anderson, it's always good to see you, brother. Thank you for being an inspiration. Assemblywoman Rozic, it's good to see you as well. And it's good to see everybody here on such an important occasion. I want to talk to you about why voting matters. I don't know if President Wu is still here. Yes, there you go. Thank you, sir, for your leadership as well and bringing focus on this important right, and to everybody at Queens College who's dedicated to highlighting the importance of this right at this time. We are less than 50 days away from Election Day, but still more than 30, which is an important point. Tomorrow is National Voter Registration Day, and it is critical that all of us get out and be heard. This is the essence of democracy. If you commit to democracy, you are committing to making sure that we seek change. We seek change in a dignified way through the ballot box, not through violence. And I think it's a very important point to make in today's climate. If you are committed to democracy, you are committed to nonviolent transition of power. That's what you're committed to. And I think it's important to highlight that. It's also important to know that I get it. We're living in very dysfunctional, extreme times. And it's easy, if you're young in particular, to be very dismissive of government. It's easy to be very dismissive of the role it actually plays that can be viewed as constructive or thoughtful. Big reason why I became a hip hop artist many, many years ago was because I was cynical about the role of political life. I was cynical about how much change you can make through the formal process of governing. It's okay to be cynical to some degree, but the moment you walk away from your power to vote is the moment you put yourself in chains. Freedom is participation in power. Freedom is participation in power. So if you decide to not participate in any instrument you possess to exercise your power as an American, you are essentially making yourself comfortable with being a prisoner of your mind. At the end of the day, it's that simple. You can get caught up in, well, how much does it really matter? Where's the change in my neighborhood or in my world? And that's the calculus that everybody who tries to make it hard for you to vote is making. You look at some of the ways we measure polling and how we attract folks who are voting, and I guarantee you a lot of these numbers and models, they don't include young people. Because the assumption in that calculus is, well, they're not going to show up anyway. Because they don't believe it affects them anyway. Until we all exercise our right, the status quo will always remain. It becomes a self-fulfilling prophecy. Well, my vote doesn't matter. Well, when you don't vote, yeah, you don't matter in that way. Only when you assert yourself. It took me some time to figure this out, to be honest with you. You know, it wasn't as if I was always somebody who saw all this clearly. But the older I got, the more I became to understand that the bar for what we want and what we expect can't be the ideal. It can't be, oh, it has to be this or nothing. Because the moment you set the bar too high, you allow the ceiling to drop too low. I'm sorry, the floor to drop too low. What do I mean by that? You allow folks to exploit your absence. You allow folks to fill in the void that you haven't filled. You allow bad actors to manipulate the situation. So focused on how high the bar should be, you lose sight of how you're letting the floor drop way too low. Do your job and set the floor. Do your job and say, we're not going below this point. I might not be able to get this high, but I'll be damned if we go this low. That's the question you have to wrestle with. And as alluded to earlier, a lot of folks realized this a long time ago. And New York has a rich history a long time ago. Not too long, no. You go back to Seneca Falls, where women had to congregate and decide, we should be heard too. We want to vote too. Women got together. In fact, the date, just so we're all clear, July 19th, 1848, 200 women. Jane Hunt, Elizabeth Stanton, Martha Wright. Some believe Sojourner Truth was in that room as well, along with Frederick Douglass, one of the few men that were in this room, packed Wesleyan Chapel in Seneca Falls to signal to the entire world there will be a women's rights movement. And 65 years, more than 65 years after that, 1917, New York will become one of the first states in this country to give women the right to vote. 3 years prior to 1920, the 19th Amendment. Who knows about Bloody Sunday? In Alabama, 1965, Edmund Pettus Bridge. John Lewis walked Dr. King across that bridge and got beaten within an inch of his life by state troopers, all because he wanted to vote and was willing to die on that bridge that day for that right to vote. And so many others before him, because he knew it wasn't that long ago when black folks had to be terrorized by the KKK with burning crosses on the lawns of courthouses right in front of voting centers to deter them from going to vote. Why did they care so much to stop folks from voting? Ask yourself that question. And why were folks so determined to vote? Why? If it didn't matter. Why were they willing to sacrifice their lives if it didn't matter? Don't take this right for granted. Don't act like it's just a given. And I get it. It's not like change is guaranteed. You're going to wake up, oh, I voted, and I see it all in front of me now. I get it. But again, the floor. Focus on the floor. That, to me, is what's most important in this moment. I'll just say this in conclusion. And hopefully, as you think about what it means to be a part of a democracy, democracy is a moral endeavor. It's the only political system that has a moral aspect to it. It's a moral endeavor because it breaks down to this idea that one person, one vote. And why do we say that? Why does that matter? Why does every single person get a single vote? Well, underlying that concept is that we're all created equal. That's the moral concept. Race doesn't matter, religion doesn't matter, gender doesn't matter, sexual orientation doesn't matter. We're equal because of our shared humanity that is gifted to us by a higher power. The moment you divorce yourself from that, are we talking about a moral system? You could have a lot of other political systems that are governed by bloodline, that are governed by wealth, that are purely nationalistic. But those aren't moral systems. Those are systems based on status, systems based on birthright, not systems based on our shared humanity as people. And so understand that if you want to assign yourself as a member of a democracy and you hold true to that belief, then you got to believe in it like an article of faith. You have to believe in it, which means you have to show up when it matters and do your part. Do your part as somebody who believes in democracy. If you believe in it, then you got to do your part. And it's not just voting. Voting is essential. It is necessary, but it's not everything. Engage, educate yourself, be informed, serve your community, lean into your community, figure out how to help those in need, whether it's food insecurity, whether it's the climate crisis, whether it's housing crisis, you name it, whether it's mental health issues, substance abuse. Where can you be impactful? Serve your community and empower yourselves and your community through service and civic engagement. In New York, we are standing up a statewide office that my office is leading to ensure that we do just that over the coming years. And we know that the more people serve, the more civically minded they become. So if you're right now not that civically minded, you're not that locked into what it means to vote, go serve. Go engage and get more attuned to what's going on in your community. I guarantee you, the more you get tapped into your community and the more you give to your community, the more you'll start realizing, I better do everything in my power to ensure that I'm doing right by my community. And that means voting too. That means voting too. So I've probably talked longer than I was asked to talk. These are welcoming remarks. So I welcome you. I welcome all of you. I'm glad you're here, and I hope you feel my passion. I have remarks here, and I try to stick to them, but at the end of the day, I really appreciate that you're here. I do. I really do appreciate that you're here and that you're listening. And I just hope that over the course of today and days that follow, a little bit of what I said you can carry with you. But know that I'm also here with you. I want to partner with you. I want to give you opportunities to figure out how to do this the right way at the state level. You got a lot of power in your hands. A lot. You got a lot of information coming at you too. You got a whole world inside your pocket on your arm now that we didn't have to have when I was a kid growing up. And that could be a lot to process. But the truth of the matter is there's a lot of power that comes with that too. And it's incumbent upon us as leaders to help you with that and to show you some guidelines and some directions on that. But we can start with voting. Appreciate all of you. Love you.
Let's give him another hand. This was fantastic. Thank you so much, Lieutenant Governor. So we're going to do two quick things in the background. We're going to introduce our panelists and our moderator, and we're going to ask Dr. George to pull up the screen for us. So we're going to be doing that at this time. And here we have our student leaders to do that.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Cristina Solano. I am a sophomore at Queens College, majoring in political science and minoring in legal studies. I am part of the Generation Leaders from SEEK. I am the wellness chair, and I am also a fellow from Shirley Chisholm Fellowship. It is my great honor to introduce you guys to Assemblywoman Nily Rozic, who represents New York's 25th District, which spans the eastern portion of Queens. Upon her election in 2012, she became the youngest woman in the state legislature and the first woman ever to represent the 25th District. Nily is chair of the Consumer Affairs and Protection Committee and the services on the Assembly's rules, Ways and Means, Labor and Corporations, Authorities and Commissions committees in Queens and Albany. Nily is an outspoken advocate for working and middle-class families, immigrant communities, and students. In 2013, Nily was named the Rising Star on the city and state's annual list of Next Generation of Political Leaders. She has been a featured speaker at Running Start's Young Women's Political Summit, Ignites Young Women's Political Mobilization Conference, and Belle Abzug Leadership Institute. She was the finalist for the first ever Emily's List Gabrielle Gifford's Rising Class of 2017 under CUNY's Institute for Local and State Governance, as well as Governing Magazine's Women in Governmental Leadership Program Class of 2017. Thank you, Nily Rozic.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Theodore Mitchell, but a lot of you definitely know me better as TJ. I'm currently in my sophomore year. I am the current president of the Sikh Gen Leaders Class of 2027 and a recent graduate of the Shirley Chisholm Leadership Fellowship. It is my pleasure to be introducing Assemblymember Khaleel Anderson. Assemblymember Khaleel Anderson was elected to serve District 31 in Queens for his first term in November 2020. He represents Brookville, Far Rockaway, Hamels, Rosedale, South Ozone Park, Springfield Gardens, parts of Arvern, and John F. Kennedy International Airport. Anderson is the youngest Black Assembly member ever elected in the New York State history. Assemblymember Anderson began his young career as a community advisor at 13 and has since been dedicated to leadership, service, and advocacy. For the 2023 legislative session, his primary priorities include foot apartheid, housing insecurity, and structural violence. Prior to his election, he demonstrated his ability to govern while serving as a student activist and respected community activist. He worked to build a half-acre urban farm that provides fresh produce, workshops, training on healthy eating, and employment opportunities for young people. He remains committed to amplifying the unique voices of young people to all his constituents. Assemblymember Anderson was born in Brooklyn and raised in the Rockaways. Khaleel graduated from Queens College with the bachelor's program and finalizing and master's in urban affairs with a minor in cities and social medicine. He works as a supplemental instructor for the Percy E. Sun Search for Education Elevation, other known as the Sikh program at Queens College.
Hello, everyone. My name is Arifah Chowdry. I am a freshman with an intended major of chemistry, and I am an upcoming potential Sikh generational leader. Today, I have the pleasure of introducing to you Zaire Couloute. Couloute received her public health degree at Boston University School of Public Health and Health Policy and Law and Global Health. She has done research in infectious diseases and is getting her first publication. Before receiving her MPH, she was a Queens College Sikh student, two-term Student Association president, and Sikh generational leader. She recently rejoined the QC Sikh community as a supplemental instructor and a generational leader advisor.
Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. How are y'all feeling? Good, good. Sounds good. We'll be able to get another warm round of applause for our guests. Thank you so much. So we'll be running this panel in 3 sections. So after each section, as we speak, as we engage, please think of questions. And at the end of each section, we'll pause for questions, both in person and on Zoom. So our first section is questions on local government and its impact on college students. And our first question is, okay, good. What are 1 or 2 local policies that you support that directly impact the youth and students in particular?
Yeah, thank you so much for that question, Zaire, and to all of you all for being here. When I think about policies that impact young people, I think about 2 pieces of legislation, one that I have written and one that I hope to champion next session. The one that I've written is called the Purple Alert Law, and it's coupled with the Destiny Smothers Law. And those are 2 bills. Those were my two first pieces of legislation that I wrote that dealt with domestic violence. And there are oftentimes women, particularly women of color, go missing. And it takes a really long time for law enforcement and all of the various entities to respond and get involved. And the bill was named after a young woman who was in a noted domestic violence relationship where there was intimate partner violence there. And that was something that law enforcement and all the other relevant parties, including the Administration from Children's Services, knew about. And so what my bill seeks to do is to close the loophole in terms of response time, but also give a purple alert, similar to the silver alert, similar to the bronze alert. It would give a purple alert to law enforcement entities to alert that not only is someone missing, but someone who has a history of being in a relationship with intimate partner violence. So that's the first piece of legislation that comes to mind and that impacts young people. And the second one deals with how we look at young people as it relates to crimes that are committed, right? Looking at individuals who are under the age of 25 through the Youth Justice and Justice to Alternatives to Justice, looking at that. So I'm working with some groups to champion that legislation next session.
So again, Zaire, thank you so much. I'm going to focus, I guess, two bills, 2 laws, one that's already on the books, but one I hope to work on next year. The first, both deal with voting and voter registration. So the first is, if you are in the city of New York or in the state of New York, pre-registering to vote when you're 16 or 17. How many of you had actually done that? Pre-register. So when you're in high school, your teacher comes up to you and says, let's pre-register you to vote. Before a couple of years ago, that was not a reality in New York, right? And what we wanted to do was to find people where they're at. And that means registering you to vote at your high school before you go off to the world, before you go off to college. So right now in the state of New York, you can pre-register at 16 or 17. Now, that is law. Let's take it to the next level. Can we register 17-year-olds to vote in a primary before the actual general election if you're going to be 18 at that general election? So let's say you want to vote this year you wanted to vote this year in the presidential primary in April, okay? And you were 17 years old, and by November you would be 18. If we are able to pass this law next year or in the years to come, that would have meant that you could actually participate in the presidential primary. It's so essential that we start getting folks used to using that political muscle. It's like muscle memory. Once you start voting and voting early or voting in primaries, you're going to keep doing it. You're not just going to be a fan of voting for voting's sake. You're going to have that political muscle already built in. So I'm hoping next year we can actually pass that into law, to actually get 17-year-olds thinking about voting before you even leave your high school.
Thank you so much. So this issue is very salient. As a college student living in a blue state, will the policies proposed in Project 2025 impact me or be embraced by the Democratic Party?
Well, let's be very clear that Project 2025 is not part of the Democratic Party platform in any way, shape, or form. It is actually a very scary series of documents pushed by the other side, by the Republican Party and the Trump campaign. I want to be very clear about that. That does not reflect our values here in New York at all. What I will say is, going to your question, if you are a young woman in the state of New York and you care about your reproductive freedom, you should be voting in this presidential campaign, in this presidential election. It is such a big threat to our reproductive freedom that you need to have skin in the game and you need to go out and vote. Project 2025 is not a joke. It will infringe upon your rights. It will infringe upon your rights as an individual, but also think about other young people across this country. You need to make it known, make a stance that you do not agree at all with those principles and that your power is in your vote.
Thank you.
So just similar to what my colleague Nily said, Project 2025 is an existential threat to many of you all who sit here in this room today. And one particular, and of course, it's not related to the Democratic Party by any means. It's actually antithetical to what we stand for as Democrats. However, I think that one particular point in the Project 2025 that is existential, and it is an existential threat rather, is this Schedule F proposal. Now, myself and Nily, we serve as elected officials. Everyone who is appointed by us to serve on our staff are appointments. We make those appointments, and those are our staff members that carry out the duties and responsibilities of our district. What Schedule F, and they serve at our pleasure. What Schedule F says is that it will do away with the concept of having to take a civil service test and to qualify for government positions, and turn those all into Schedule F, which is serving at the pleasure of the President of the United States. So think of a mailman who comes to deliver your mail, not serving at the pleasure of the post office and having the union protections that that individual came in with after taking a test, or an EPA worker or any of these federal agencies. Now you serve at the pleasure of, and today, we can feel you're not serving well and you can lose your job. And that's the dangerousness of it, because a civil servant is just that, a civil servant, someone who takes an exam, someone who's qualified and has these different things. So it is, I think that one is the most existential threat and to us. And if we're serious about, after we graduate from here, going and qualifying or applying for a federal job or even a state job, and we want that right protected, we should definitely be voting in this election.
Thank you both. So the SEEK program is a legislated program, but there's always a threat of the program being underfunded or dismantled. How can the state protect programs like SEEK?
Yeah, very, very good question. And I love the alley-oop, because being a former SEEK student, we're always advocating to preserve and protect this program so that it can continue to produce the future leaders, those who are going to be carrying on the mantle. And I'm excited that myself and Assemblywoman Rozic fought really hard in this budget to expand access and funding to opportunity programs. And I think how we secure and protect this program is to ensure that it's enshrined in law, that the monies that we have allocated to this program, we can clap that up. That's a good thing. The monies that are allocated to the program stay in the program and stay into the mission of the program. And I think myself and the Assemblywoman advocated for a budget this year that saw an increase in opportunity programs across the state, including SEEK. Now, it's just about making sure that those dollars are spent in a way that recognizes the need is growing, right? When we increase the budget, does that budget meet the needs of today? Does it meet the needs of the growing SEEK population? Does it meet the needs of our enrollment changes? These are the things that myself and the Assemblywoman are considering as we're passing the budget, as you guys come up for lobby days and advocacy days to Albany. We hear those concerns, and we want to make sure that we're representative of that.
Thank you. Nothing to add?
Hey, how many of you have actually been to Albany, to the state capitol? Okay, about maybe a third of you. It's really, really critical that next year, when they ask for volunteers to come to Albany and advocate for programs like this one, that you sign up, that you come to Albany, that you tell your story, and that you have your voice heard. I met Assemblymember Anderson on his trip to Albany advocating for the SEEK program, and look at where he's at now. It's a huge accomplishment. And now, you know, y'all don't have to run for office, but you can get your start in government, in politics, doing advocacy days, coming to Albany and lobbying for causes that you care about. It's not just, you know, some dull trip where you get to see the state capitol where a bunch of, you know, dead people used to work. It is actually like meeting your local representative who at the end of the day has to vote on your priorities. And if you aren't making your priorities heard, someone else is. Someone else is. You can bet your bottom dollar on that. So it's really, really important that you come up to Albany, you advocate, you go meet legislators at the local offices, and that you show your support for SEEK. Because it's not just about this generation. Think about also the kids who want to enroll next year and the years to come.
Thank you so much. Very important. And now I'd like to bring our attention to our co-moderators, Shemearra McCloud, Daniel Jory, and our Zoom moderator, Chloe Jules. If you have a question, please raise your hand in person. And in the chat, if you have it written, Chloe will be reading it for you. Any questions? Don't be shy. Yes. Right? Interactive.
Hello? Okay. Hello, everyone. So on the Zoom, we have both a comment and a question. So one person stated that SA and DV can be so incredibly prevalent on college campuses and in many young people's lives as they navigate interpersonal relationships. So I, for one, am happy to hear about Assembly members Khaleel's legislation to address the issue of DV in colleges. And one question that we have: what beginning steps can we as new or first-time voters take to help us be more informed about our candidates and their policies?
So the first thing you can do is just go out and research. Go out and research your local assembly member, your local council member, your local congressman, to see what they're about if you don't know. Every year, the Campaign Finance Board actually puts out small questionnaires about every candidate that you probably get in the mail and throw out. But you can open that little pamphlet and read up on candidates in your area. That's one way to do it. I would also just say, like, when you're going out to vote, bring your auntie, bring your mom, bring your dad, make it a family event. That way there's power in numbers, and you have, you know, an outing, so to say. You can actually make it into a social event. Bring a friend, bring a neighbor, remind other people to vote, because if you bring another person or another 5 people, that actually makes a difference in local races.
I want to that point, I want you all to take a look at Who Represents Me, which is a tool that was created by CUNY students, by the CUNY Graduate Center. And Who Represents Me, if you go online and type on Google and type in Who Represents Me, it'll tell you all your city, state, federal representatives. And I would then encourage you to follow them on social media. And whomever you see in the voter guide that you get in the mail, that like the Assemblywoman mentioned, follow those folks on social media as well. This is how you'll stay attuned to their policies, their platforms, what they're doing in the communities, and where your priorities lie as well. My Instagram is @Khaleel Anderson.
Hi, we have a question over here.
Hi, this is a question for Representative Khaleel. With your Purple Alert legislation, do you hope to help domestic violence shelters like Asia's Women's Shelter and such?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for that question. So my hope is that, again, with that legislation, we're able to put more notification out there so that if someone goes missing, it allows us the opportunity to treat it as sensitive as it is. It's someone who is a domestic violence victim and in living in a domestic violence shelter is doubly more vulnerable and needs and would benefit from this piece of legislation. So that's my hope, that once we pass it, it'll give an opportunity. And it's actually passed twice in the state Senate. We just have to move it in the Assembly and reach a deal with the governor to move this thing over the finish line.
We have another question over here.
Hi, good afternoon. For the young voters that are not politically involved, education is a major concern. Do you think that a lack of understanding of government processes is a significant barrier for young voters? And what strategies would you suggest to address the issue? This is for everyone, by the way.
It's a great question. Yes, civic education is so important. I will plug my high school again. We, in our senior year of high school, did an entire election simulation where the whole school actually turns into one big election. You have one class of candidates, you have one class of special interests, one class pretends that they're reporters and media, and each student, the entire school actually gets dollars to spend on particular campaigns. And like for 2 months, the whole school is running a huge election simulation in order to gather up votes. And that really teaches students about every aspect of the election process. That's the exception. That's not the rule in most schools in New York City. I actually wrote a law based on that experience to reinforce civic education at all levels of your schooling, starting in elementary school, going through middle school and high school, because we have to get kids thinking about voting early, right? Again, it has to be that muscle memory that they know November's coming, gotta go vote in the local election. That does not happen enough. I'm hoping to pass that bill into law. But in lieu of that, we have to make sure that students at every high school are getting their civic education. You know, you take your government class, but how much of that actually sticks, I don't know. So we have to really push the barriers and make sure that kids know that voting is a piece of it, but you know, there's a whole curriculum behind civic engagement.
Thank you. Okay, so we have one more question over here.
So my question is, are you working on any bills or laws that address environmental racism?
Thank you so much for that question. And I'm glad that you asked it, because the elephant in the room is that many of us live in communities that are experiencing environmental racism, whether it's through truck traffic, whether you live in Southeast Queens and airplanes are flying over, fuselage is impacting the air. There are many, many different instances where people are breathing in toxic air. And so I have two pieces of legislation. One is very controversial, and another one is very interesting. So I'll do the controversial one first. I believe that our airliners should be paying a little bit extra for the pollution that impacts our air. And I have a piece of legislation that would assess a fee on airliners that would ensure that money is available for communities for harm mitigation and reduction where airliners are polluting the air. Now, this is a deviation. It's controversial because it's a deviation from the original bill, which added that assessment to the consumer at a rate. And here's my reasoning. Adding it to the consumer so that there is more of environmental conservation mindset when purchasing an airline ticket and this type of thing. But also based off of income, if you're flying, you're in a higher income bracket statistically than individuals who take buses and trains to commute or to navigate our states in a longer commute. So we're making those changes to that legislation and are going to reintroduce it. I think it should go to the airliner. The second one deals with mandatory air quality testing. Right now, I'm fighting a major battle in my district against a polluter, a plant near the Redfern houses in the Rockaways that has, for the last 20 years, been allowing for particulate matter to be polluting the air and impacting the NYCHA residents, the public housing residents that live across the street from the plant. And so what my bill would do is require mandatory air quality testing, and that air quality testing to be reported to the New York State Department of Health to ensure that we're monitoring air and that we're putting in harm mitigation and reductions. And I think to share something that's not public yet, we've been fighting that developer and negotiating with that developer, and we've pushed that developer to now put air filters in every single apartment that's facing that that construction plant, because we know that there is a correlation with this plant being here and the high asthma rates that we're seeing in Redfern houses.
Thank you so much to you both, and thank you for your questions. If you have any more for now, we're going to hold it until the end of round 2. And on Zoom, please continue with the questions. Yes, 2 more to go. So this round is going to be on questions on ballot initiatives. Our first question is, even with Pell Grants and TAP, many college students still have to work to help support their families. What are your views on minimum wage? What possibilities are there for an increase in the minimum wage?
So certainly the minimum wage should increase, and I believe the Assembly member and I were fighting 2 budgets ago to increase the minimum wage and tie it to inflation. And we didn't win that battle, but we did get a small bump in the minimum wage. And that's, that is a part of our strategy. I think that in addition to that, making access to, making sure that those who are in the gig working space as well, those who are not covered, your baristas, your delivery drivers are also ones that we look at in terms of increases. I know we did something big in New York City, but making sure that that's something that exists across the state. And that's how we'll answer that.
Thank you. And do you have anything? Okay, next question. Thank you so much. What policies exist or are needed for students who work so that they can have access to healthcare?
Well, healthcare is a human right, right? Goes without saying. We fight every budget cycle for increases in not just the student programs that we talked about in the first question, but also healthcare systems across the city and across the state. I think the underlying theme that we're coming across in all of this is that you need young people in government to hear these kinds of questions and to fight for these kinds of policies, right? The experiences that Khaleel has, the experiences that I've had growing up in Queens, understanding what's happening in our neighborhoods informs what we do in Albany. Hearing questions and hearing from all of you informs what we do in Albany. And I think that that is sort of the underlying theme to all of this. But when we talk about healthcare, when we talk about safe streets, when we talk about environmental justice, that is all tied into who actually represents you and making sure that we are advocating for the right issues in Albany.
Thank you. So we're going to take another pause here for questions. In person, please raise your hand, and Daniel is here for you. And do you have any online?
Homelessness is a very serious issue. And when I was a student here at Queens, in my junior year, I did a project studying student homelessness with the Urban Studies Department and trying to figure out how to bridge the gap with students who either in temporary housing or fall into an instance when they need to be in temporary housing. When I stumbled upon Queens College, I was displaced. In 2012, 2013, I was displaced, and my hurricane shelter was here at Queens College. So my family and I lived in the cafeteria for a few weeks after Superstorm Sandy because our home was leveled by the floodwaters. And that's a really good question that you asked the student over there about climate change. We saw it happen in the Rockaways in 2012. And so this issue of homelessness, people often think it looks like street homelessness, and it often looks like individuals who are struggling with substance abuse, but it can show itself in many different ways. And myself and the Assemblywoman have been fighting for HSS, the Home Stability and Support Act, which is legislation that would essentially create a voucher program so that individuals can be able to afford this housing market that we're experiencing here in New York. And that's one of the things that we've fought for. Another thing that we can do to address homelessness, and particularly student homelessness, is ensuring that colleges and campuses across our state have access to subsidy so that they can house some of the students who are on campus in their dormitories, or even encouraging agreements with local housing that is in and around that college campus so that students can live while they study. So these are some of the ideas that are coming out of Albany, that are coming from my colleague and I, that we have fought on. But they're, imperfect ideas. They're ideas that need your input, your lived experience, so that it can tighten up and address those issues. So I hope that addresses not just the homelessness piece that we're working on and providing vouchers, but also ideas on how we can help stem the issues of student homelessness.
Thank you. And we have one
Have a question? I was just wondering if you can elaborate further on when you mentioned the views on crime of those under 25. Like, what are your actual plans for it? Like, what do you mean? Just like elaborate further upon it. Thank you.
Sure. So presently, and before the end of this, I'll give you the bill number so you can study the bill. But presently, my colleague holds a bill that looks at individuals who are under the age of 25. And what the bill would essentially do is assign YO status to that individual, dependent upon the crime, certain crime categories, et cetera. There's protections in place and this type of thing. So I want to make sure you understand that. And it would assign them YO status. For those who don't know, who have not been through the criminal legal system, I have, and I'm familiar with those terms, youth offender status, which immediately wouldn't send you to jail. Of course, certain categories now, I just want to be clear. But it would look at alternatives to incarceration. It would look at mental health services and support for that individual who's under the age of 25. And it would look at the history of that individual as well. Have they committed crimes in the past? What were those crimes? This type of thing. and look at it from a public health aspect rather than a criminal aspect. And the reasoning why is because data shows that individuals who are under the age of 25 have not fully developed their brain. And so there are many different aspects of their brain and their brain function that impact their actions and how they navigate spaces. So again, my colleague holds the bill presently, and I hope next legislative session to be a champion of that legislation because we know that it's important to make sure that people are getting placed in the right places. We don't want to send folks to Rikers Island. We don't want to send folks to upstate prisons when that's not the setting that they need to treat the underlying symptoms of what they're facing.
Beautiful, thank you. So we'll take one on Zoom and then one in person.
We just fight for more money, right? Queens get the money. Like, that's what it comes down to. Our New York State budget is the second largest in the entire country after California. It is billions of dollars. And so we have to fight every single year to make sure that that money is being directed to the right place. That includes things like your basic upgrades to maintaining a campus like this. But it also means ensuring that you have teachers in every classroom. It makes sense to you and I, but to other people who are fighting for other things, it doesn't. And so that's really, really critical. And we do it every year. It's called budget dance. Go back and forth with the governor and her team. And we have to ensure that higher education institutions and colleges and universities are getting their fair share. That's what it comes down to. Because if we don't have the money trickling down to our classrooms, like what, we're lost, right? Where are we going to get?
So this is a question in general. Speaking on affordability in New York, how are we addressing the issue with the MTA? Just yesterday, an 18-year-old was shot for jumping the turnstiles. How do we address this criminalization of poverty?
So again, thank you for that question. So there's two ways to answer that question. Number one, every single New Yorker has a right to safe, affordable transportation across this city and across this state. And the incident that we saw in Brooklyn yesterday is a painful reminder that there's so much happening as it relates to this ever-growing expensive city and cost of living here. And so one of the things that has been done on the city council level, and we're state representatives, so it's important to recognize the delineation, is that they've expanded the Fair Fares program to ensure that individuals who can't afford the fare can get reduced price Metro cards. And they've also fought to ensure that ferry service for those who are commuting via water is reduced for high school students. And I'm not sure if college students are included in that, but this is the acts of the city council that made that happen. So that's the first piece around the affordability. The second piece is that as we've been seeing an increase in fare evasion, the MTA reports that over $500 million per year, roughly give or take, is lost due to fare evasion. And so while that is a very real fact and that is a very real reality, we have to look at why people are evading the fare. And, you know, I really commend the Assemblywoman because herself and I fought for a program that would pilot free bus service here in the county of Queens and across the 5 counties. And that free bus service has ended, but there's some really important data that comes from it that shows that if we invest directly in public transportation and we invest in affordability for that transportation system, we'll see a better outcomes. But look, I think that's the reality. We're facing that budget deficit due to fare evasion. We're trying to throw everything that we can at it in terms of making it more affordable. But it's important that we have all folks cooperating with us and making sure that they're connected to resources. I think also too, to answer the policing piece of it, I think that we should be pushing the MTA and other entities to have individuals and booths set up at each train station or on each bus to ensure that people who don't know about the Fair Fares program, they can sign up right then and there and get their MetroCard right then and there, so that we can shift those police resources to getting people onto this program, because it's been under enrolled. It is a creation of the city council, but data has shown that that program is under enrolled, and people knew that they only had to pay $1.45 to get on buses and trains. I think they'd take that option.
Thank you so much. And to wrap it up, as a young person living in a blue state, does my vote matter?
I'm going to go with yes. And here's why. Okay. So at the top, you heard a little bit about my bio. I ran in 2012 before it was the cool thing to do. I ran against a stale pale male because I knew my community needed a choice, needed something different, someone who would actually go and represent them in the halls of Albany, not just sit on their hands. Okay. I ran in a non-presidential year. Okay. And I ran in a primary election in New York, which really is the election. Okay. But let's break that down. Khaleel and I represent around 125, okay, you represent a little bit more, 125,000 people. Guess how many are actually registered to vote? About half of that. Okay. Now we're talking about a Democratic primary. So out of, let's say, 80,000 of those, maybe around 50,000 of those are actually registered as Democrats who can vote in a primary. In my race, which was actually on a Thursday, not on a Tuesday, because voter suppression is real, guess how many people actually voted? 6,000 people. I won that election with roughly 3,000 and change votes. Okay. That was my first race, and it ebbs and flows every year, but that was a pretty big deal race, and that was only determined by 3,000 people. Most of you probably went to high school with a lot more kids than that, right? In your intro to psych class, there's a sizable amount of voters who can actually throw elections. In an election in the Bronx recently, one of our colleagues won his election by 2 votes. And this happens every year. At local and state elections, elections are determined by the amount or less than the amount of people in this room. So even though you think you're in a blue state, even though you think, okay, we're all voting Democratic, that's not the case at the local and state level. It's so essential that you go vote, because you have the power to change the dynamics of any given race. And that's a real, my case is a real example. Our colleague in the Bronx, that's a real example. And that happens every cycle. And so I think you can get lost in what happens, nationally. You can get lost in what happens statewide. But when it comes to your neighborhood, think about it in those terms, that you and your group of friends, you and your family, could actually determine the results of an election.
To Nily's point, I want to say too, it's so important for you all to vote in your city, state, and local elections, because oftentimes we are the ones making those critical decisions that impact you. Think about the SEEK program, for example. That program was not created by the federal government. It was created by an act of the legislature. The 2 folks sitting here, these are things that directly impact you. But also, I brought this little graphic that I created and I keep in my office. And when I think about each position, whether you're a city council member, whether you're a state assembly member, whether you're a state senator, or whether you're on your town or county board, if you live in another county outside of New York City, I look at what's the job description. And on here I have what does an assembly member do? And if this is not enough for you to go out and vote, I'm not sure in terms of blue state, I'm not sure what will, because when we're looking at policy, when we're looking at navigating the budget, whether we're looking at oversight over agencies that are responsible for responding to what you need, that's the job that you're hiring somebody to do that you may not have time to do because you're a working class New Yorker and you're navigating your life and what you're doing, or you're a student. You hire us to do that work for you. So you want to know who you're hiring. And when I look at, as I close out, when I look at my election, similar to Nily's, my race, we made history, but it was only the difference of 800 votes that made that difference. 800 people that said, I'm going to show up today and not stay home.
Thank you both so much. Can we please get another round of applause for our guests? Thank you. And we will be serving pizza upstairs. Thank you all for your time. And yeah.